What is up, Brad fans? By this point, I think you know what I'm going to say. Follow us on all of our channels at 2brad4you, Twitter, Instagram. Also, rate, subscribe to the show wherever you're getting podcasts, comment. That also really helps us. And, tell a friend. Why not? Having said all that, this episode sees good friend of the show, Jared Cuthbertson, over there in Vancouver, join us. And he had the idea for this episode, which started with an article he sent me about researchers giving ecstasy to octopuses. So then we got down the wormhole of animal experiments with psychedelics, why you would do that, and the weird history of that. So we start there. But Jared also suggested that we talk to his friend over also on the West Coast in Vancouver, Owen Roche, who has gone on the ayahuasca retreat, an ayahuasca retreat, which is ayahuasca is a pretty powerful psychedelic. It's used in traditional cultures in the Amazon, so indigenous cultures in the Amazon, as a spiritual guide, medicine, this kind of thing. It's plant-based. It ends up being the active chemicals like DMT, so it's a very strong psychedelic. And it's becoming more and more popular, along with the popularity of psychedelics, to be used to help with issues of mental illness, or just wanting to explore your psyche, I guess. I mean, Owen had his reasons for doing it, which he will explain, and I think that's important to note, is that it's like, we're not talking about this just as like, take some drugs and have a good time, trip out, Now, this is really meant to be in the vein of a, I don't know, treatment is maybe the wrong word, because it's not necessarily like, you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosed mental illness to benefit from this, but to I think the point I'm trying to make is to keep it in that vein. This isn't a frivolous thing. And I really want to thank Owen for coming on and talking about his experience, because, I mean, it is a personal thing. So he was really great, really open, had some really interesting insights into the experience, what it meant to him, how it all worked. And so it was a really fun conversation. So I want to thank Jared for setting that up and coming on the show again. As always, he's a pleasure to pod with. And yeah, I'll just say thank you again to Owen for coming on and sharing his experience. So there we go. You've heard the intro. Enjoy the conversation. All right, folks, welcome to this episode, where we're going to be talking a little bit about, if you've listened to the show, you know that I enjoy this subject. So we're going to be talking a little bit about psychedelics, psychedelic medicines, the plant medicines, as I call them. And what better way to talk about this than bring in two dudes over there on the, the West Coast, the coast that's synonymous with hippies and all of these sorts of fun medicines. My good buddy Jared, friend of the show, Jared Cuthbertson, is back. Jared, what's up?
Not too much, man. Just just thinking about doing some medicines this weekend.
Right on.
You got to
Well, and
get
Jared,
rolling. Talk my medicine, man.
yeah. And Jared, you brought with you your
This is
buddy.
my good friend Owen, who is also very I don't know, what do you call got a depth of knowledge when it comes to
Experience, we'll say.
yeah. He's a junkie.
Experience. Yeah, we don't want to make you sound too out there, but Owen, thanks for taking the time to be here, and we'll get into your sort of experience down in Peru at a ayahuasca retreat. But let's start, Jared, because you sent me this article the other day, and Owen, you can chime in as you see fit on this.
Mm-hmm.
But Jared sent me this thing the other day. It was from 2 years ago, I think now. How are you framing it, Jared? The MDMA puss?
Yeah, MDMA to puss. That they study giving MDMA to octopuses.
Yeah, why?
I mean, if you could pick one animal to give like MDMA to, who I think it would be like an octopus. Makes perfect sense. Like
I
it
mean,
got all those tentacles to touch and feel, and that.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
So many things to touch with.
yeah,
I just want to know if they have those, the raver soothers, if they provided enough raver soothers for each arm
Hmm.
as
octopuses
they
can
were on
change
there.
color on their own. They don't need them, man. They're their
Hmm.
own
Yeah, that's
mobile rave unit.
Imagine how many bracelets they could each wear, though.
That's correct.
All access octopus.
Well, here's what I found interesting about this story. I mean, and then we did a little bit of reading about like the history of giving psychedelics to animals, which seems sketchy to me at best. Like I can understand why you would do it. There's certain reasons why you would, like with anything, why we use animals for these kind of tests. But some of the other ones that I was looking
Fun
at, I was like,
to watch.
yeah, yeah, it just seemed a
It's
little
fun to
like
watch
really.
animals trip out, man. I think that's
I mean,
yeah.
talk to any high school stoner with a pet dog, and they'll tell you that. So yeah, but the octopus one was interesting because the way they administered it, they like put them in tanks of MDMA
Yeah,
based water, which was just like,
MDMA brine and fucking
yeah, let them stew in that for a bit. But they did see that they were like more social, so the octopuses became more social with each
mhm.
other than they normally would, and touching and feeling and getting all cuddly. Um,
Well, oh yeah, an octopus cuddle puddle. It seems terrifying
Where does
to
it
look
start?
at.
Where does it end? Right?
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Exactly.
It's like a king rat.
Whose arm is whose? Yeah. And I mean, but with a lot of these things, it always seems to me like, yeah, that's what I would expect to happen. But I guess the
Yeah.
idea the
Well,
researchers were saying is that it's like because they have such complex nervous systems and stuff like this, it does kind of model human,
yeah. Like I
responses to
guess the
stress.
way that they process like serotonin is like very similar to human beings,
Hmm.
right? And so like MDMA, I think like whatever it says, like it affects the neurotransmitters, and like your serotonin, like the same way serotonin builds up in between your synapses,
Hmm.
is the same as people. Even though like their brain, I think, is a like a donut. It's got a big hole in the middle.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's definitely a different like physical structure. And I
Yeah.
mean, isn't it like, I don't know, I could be talking out of my ass here now. I probably should have looked this up, but isn't it more kind of like they always say that the octopus brain is like they have like small brains in the arms, like these like nerve bundles in the arms or something. So it
So,
seems like
I
it's
don't
a
know
little bit,
about that.
yeah, maybe it's a bit more
I'd go with that.
decentralized or something.
That sounds
That
rad.
sounds like a dream I had last week, I think.
Like where you had brains in your hands.
Yeah, yeah. Each of my fingers had a little brain. They were all fighting with each other.
Yeah,
They
these
couldn't
hands
pick
got a
anything
mind of
up.
their own. This isn't my fault.
Uh, right. Yeah, so that was interesting, and it sent me down, like I said, down a road. And Jared, there's another one that article that kind of summarized the history of, or a select history of
Hmm.
psychedelics in animals. The one that shocked and horrified me out of that article, which we'll post to the website and stuff like that, so you can check it out, was putting monkeys in a
I knew you were gonna
sensory.
go for this one when you said horrified.
Yeah, they put monkeys in a sensory deprivation box and then gave them access to DMT
Hmm.
with the great hypothesis of will they smoke it or not. And they did. 2 out of 3 did. 2 out of 3, I
Wait.
think.
Monkeys know how to smoke something? I don't
These
You
were
understand.
have to
special
train them.
monkeys that knew how to smoke.
Yeah, you have to train them how to smoke first.
Oh,
So then, yeah, they get trained how to smoke, and then they put them in these boxes, so light deprived, sound deprived, sensory deprivation, and they
But
left
they
them
had
in
all
there.
the food and water they want.
Right. So they had food and water. These they weren't savages. Come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, and let's make this clear too. This was done in like 1980 or something. So I really
Yeah.
don't think we're doing these kind of experiments anymore. So for anyone that's like getting super shocked about this, like I said, I'm cool
It's
with
pretty
animal testing.
horrifying. Like
This is, yeah. I don't know if
that'd be
this
a
is,
that's a nightmare situation. But yeah,
yeah,
they have, it was like DMT laced cigarettes, right?
yeah,
And then they
yeah.
give them one smoke a day or something.
I think they were
And
able to, yeah, go to like it's like a smoking tube in the
that's
box.
right.
So they go up
Yeah.
to this tube and the cigarette thing is in there. And I think they could get it like, wasn't it even like once every 2 hours or something?
Yeah, maybe it was once
Or
a week.
maybe
That seemed
twice
like
a
a
day.
lot. That's why I assumed. I was like, that's a lot of DMT for a monkey. But what do I know?
Yeah,
I'm not a monkey in a dark box. Who knows
Okay,
how much DMT?
so like, what did they find? What were the results?
so
Um,
this is where, like I said, this is what, other than like the
like
horrifying
nothing.
condition
Yeah.
of putting these things in there, this is what I really questioned about it was like, what are we trying to find here? And the
Yeah.
question that they had was, will the monkeys self-administer the drug in this
Yeah.
environment? Because I guess in like a normal laboratory setting, they generally they won't, like they'll try it or something, but then they won't do it again. Like they won't willingly go for it. And I think they even
Yeah.
said that even when they tied giving them water to doing the DMT, like outside of the box,
Hmm.
they were averse to doing it. So even when like something as required as water was tied to doing the DMT, they really avoided doing the DMT. So it's not like they like it. And then, but in the box, and they left him there for like it was like 15 days or something like that. Um, they would two of the three
Jeez.
monkeys would do it regularly, you know,
Yeah.
Mm.
But
when they were in the box,
the
and one
one
of
out of the three, go ahead.
yeah, the third one didn't. He did it once and then didn't do it again, and they figured that he didn't do it again because he overdosed on the first
He
one.
just got too
Had, like,
high. He tripped too hard the first time and was like,
Mm.
no thanks.
he
I'm
had a
done with
really,
that.
really bad trip. So that was basically the question. Like as far as I could, I skimmed through the report that they wrote and stuff like that, the scientific report, and it was like,
Yeah.
hey, it turns out they'll do it. But I mean, if you know anything about the psychology of like boredom, it's like humans will
Yeah.
even administer shocks to themselves when put
Mm.
in a low stimulus environment. Like boredom is such a bad situation for social primates, humans and others, that it's like you'd be willing to do almost anything to get rid of it. So to me, it's like this says nothing about
Mm.
the drug. This says nothing about. It says more about boredom to me. So I
So,
don't.
so they inferred that, like, because of the lack of stimulation in the sensory deprivation box, these monkeys were more prone to use the DMT.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just to
I
like
guess.
have a trip. Like they said, they'd be like kind of moving their hands around, like clearly like getting like tracers from their hands. It's like just
Mm.
like getting a little bit of stimulus. Even if it was horrifying, I think was better than like no stimulus.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and I don't know that if that was like, I mean, that's what it says to me, right? And like I said, knowing a little bit about some past research into boredom and stuff like that, it's not that unheard of to think that they would do that. So I don't know if they were really, maybe there was more writing at the time or something. Like I said, it was from the 80s where they were trying to say like, oh, this is something more about psychology of using these things or mood altering aspects of it, because like there's a history of animals that get fucked up. There's animals that go out of their way to do it in the
Hmm.
wild, whether it's like fermented
Mostly getting
beer.
drunk a lot of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably because that's the easiest.
It's the easiest way to do it. Yeah, like the
But
elephants. There's those. Have you seen those videos of lemurs who like chew on that caterpillar? And
no.
then they chew on this like poisonous caterpillar. It's crazy to watch. So they get this poisonous caterpillar and they munch on it and it makes them like salivate and it kind of like dilutes the poison in the caterpillar. And then they take their saliva and rub it all over their fur so it like gets absorbed to their skin. And then they just like lemur's eyes are already very dilated. But to see like a fully dilated tripping lemur is like it's very
Yeah.
well he's Drew like it's quite horrifying actually. But the other one that I found that was kind of funny was they did some research giving coke to bees, like cocaine to
Mm.
bees.
That sounds
How
terrible.
so
Once
productive.
again, though, like
So
you're gonna give coke to something, like yeah, let's give it to bees. They're so busy.
Yeah.
Coked up bees.
It's like a model for Wall Street traders or something like this, in the hive.
Maybe
Well,
that's
dude.
the solution, right? Because I'm hearing about all these troubles with bees dying all the time. If we make the bees
Maybe
twice or three times as productive by giving them cocaine, then we can have
we get more production
half
out of
as
these
much
bees.
bees as we need, right?
That's a really good point.
Good point. Good
Write
point.
your write your member of parliament to give coke to bees. It's not going to be cheap, but I think we can do it. No, so they because like I guess like the coca plant itself, like it produces like cocaine. It's
Mhm.
poisonous to insects, right? So like
Oh,
that's the
it's
main
defense
reason why,
mechanism.
yeah, defense mechanism that it produces it so it doesn't get munched on by caterpillars. But I guess if they synthesized out whatever the poisonous component was, and then they gave it to the bees, which I don't think the article said how they were giving the coke to the bees. I don't imagine they were making a
Yeah.
tiny
Well,
bee do tiny lines of coke. And
I don't I don't think
with a
bees have
stinger,
noses.
maybe
Bees definitely don't have
it
noses.
was probably a sugar solution or something, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
just
It
like
must be a liquid.
I
wrapped it
assume
up
they
with
were
a
boofing it.
stigmata.
I assume they were boofing it.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah, they were they were parachuting it there.
Lovely. And
But
what did they find?
well, they found out, so like I guess like the way bees communicate that there's resources nearby, they do a little dance.
The wiggle dance, yeah.
Yeah, the wiggle dance. Their wiggle dance was far more frantic, and they would exaggerate the amount of resources.
So it
Which
is
is
like Wall
it's
Street
like, yeah,
traders.
like the bees are just literally dancing and spitting out amazing business ideas.
Yeah. All right. So the scientists nailed it on
Like
this one.
it's yeah, it's literally just like when you go back to it's like, yeah, these are, I don't know. Yeah, these are the effects. Apparently it's just a 1-to-1 ratio
Yeah.
of effects
Yeah.
on humans to anything.
Yeah, cocaine. Doesn't matter what species you are, turns you into an asshole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it turns you into a chattery, irritating asshole.
I wonder if they did the follow-up was like, how do the other bees react to the coked up bees? Like
Yeah,
how
they're all
long
like,
before they
ugh.
just start, yeah, ugh,
Yeah.
I'm just not even listening to this guy anymore.
But they also had they went withdrawal as well, which was like they tested their memory. They had memory loss and
Mm, mm.
things like that.
Makes sense. And I mean, I guess this is like, this is where you would, use animals because you want to look at often they'll, sacrifice the animal after the study and look at the changes in the brain or they measure
Yeah,
brain chemistry and stuff like that, stuff that you just can't do in
to
humans,
people.
especially back in the days when they were doing some of this stuff. The other interesting one that they did with insects, well, I guess not insects, excuse me, arachnids,
Yeah,
not
oof,
insects.
almost
I
lost your
almost
science license.
I almost lost my license there. Yeah, geez. Was giving different substances to spiders and seeing how it affects their web. And
Wow.
so this is I thought you might have heard of this one already, Jared, but
I think I've heard them giving marijuana
yeah,
to
so they
spiders.
did like caffeine, marijuana, and LSD to spiders and looked at their webs. And what they found was like with everything, it was basically the web like structure, like the pattern
Mhm.
of it, like the way that they build it got worse with more drug.
Mm.
Um, and with caffeine, they got smaller. The webs got smaller, but except for LSD, in that case, the like intricacy of the pattern was
Wow.
better. Like it was more detailed and it was more,
Crazy fractal
yeah.
web.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And I mean, I didn't see the pictures of it or anything like that. But this is kind of interesting to me because there is like web building is like it's when you think of like a spider, like it doesn't learn how to build a web, it just knows how to do it from the beginning of its life. So there's some kind of, it's like this really instinctual process that's somehow encoded in the tiny little spider brain, right? So it's something there. So then you're adding this substance that can alter how that that the blueprint of that plan in a certain way, which is really interesting. And there's actually a parasitoid wasp. So parasitoids are generally usually wasps, but they're, instead of a parasite that like lives in and on you during your life, that's a normal parasite. A parasitoid is, it lays its eggs on the thing and then the larvae hatch and eat that thing, so it kills it. So you see this in, like I said, wasps. There's a lot of wasps that do this. They'll lay eggs onto a cockroach or a caterpillar or something like that, and these things then hatch and then eat the host alive. So it's a lot like the movie Aliens, like it's just gnarly, gross stuff. But these things often have venoms and poisons and stuff that they use to like incapacitate the host while they're laying the eggs on it or things like this.
Hmm.
But there's one, and it's found in Costa Rica, I believe, and it'll sting the spider, its spider host, and lay a single egg on the spider, and then the spider like goes about doing its normal things until that egg like is about ready to reach maturity, and then the spider actually builds a totally unique web that only infected spiders build, and it's
Mm,
designed specifically to make a cocoon that the spider then puts itself in the cocoon and
whoa.
encases itself in there. The maggot, the larvae, the wasp larvae, eats the spider inside of that cocoon and then uses the cocoon to metamorphose into the full grown wasp, and then comes out of this cocoon. So in this poison, there's something that is encoding it, that's like telling the spider to make
Rewrites there.
web. Yeah, and it makes this new web. Yeah. And so
Wow.
they did a bunch of experiments where they would like remove the larvae and stuff from the spider at different time points and see if it would still make this web. And I
Oh,
remember, oh shit, I should have looked it up again. But it was like dependent on the thing being there. So there was some kind of like chemical communication stuff going on, which then reminds you of this LSD experiment where
yeah.
it's like you can specifically manipulate these sort of instinctual, I guess, if you want to call it, behaviors in insects with some kind of a chemical,
You know,
which
and I
is
think
just,
that's and I kind of like if you talk to people who do a lot of who are like well versed in psychedelics, right? It's you can kind of like I think a lot of like the aim is to kind of like you said like rewrite how you process like your life and stimula like in
yeah,
kind of the same way, right? Like trying to just rewrite your fucking base code or whatever.
Mm,
yeah. Well, and this brings us to the use of psychedelics in humans, yeah, right? Because it is, I mean, the scientific community right now is really into it because of the effects for potential, what look to be healing effects for mental illness, like depression mainly, I think is the one that
PTSD.
PTSD, yeah, that kind of stuff. Those are the ones I think that are mostly studied. And from, the episode I did where I went to that conference, the Mind conference in Berlin here, um, speaking with some people who were doing this research, so that we're using psilocybin with, treatment resistant depression patients. So treatment resistant in that they've tried other things and if their depression doesn't get worse, and then they do these guided psilocybin therapy sessions. One of the researchers I talked to was like, we don't really know like what the model is, like how it works,
Hmm.
or what the best way to administer therapy is. They had this model that they developed where it was like you're able to go in and find your trauma and like confront it during the psilocybin trip, because of the way that the psilocybin is working on your brain. It makes that a more um, accessible place to go and less sort of, I guess, traumatic
Yeah,
in living of it.
because I
So it
think
is
like
kind of like rewiring conditioned, like, I don't know, like, let's say, just for example, you're afraid of spiders, for example. I guess it's like the rewiring that goes on with during the psilocybin allows you to like break that connection of fear with spiders or something. I don't know.
mhm.
And I
Well,
don't think
also
anyone really knows how it all works.
yeah, I think a lot of it too, like especially like using MDMA for like treating PTSD. It's like
So
it
hmm
says, yeah, like it allows you, like if you're with a psychiatrist, right, or a therapist, it allows you to like talk about that trauma without having like, because normally like where you would be triggered by that trauma, right,
hmm
and then I think
mm,
your brain starts closing down to protect you from that. So like you have like an episode and you totally shut down, allows you, yeah, to talk and like work through that because your brain is just being pumped full of serotonin.
hmm hmm
mm. Well, it's interesting. Like you know, Brad, you mentioned being able to say, like to simplify things, being able to overcome a fear of spiders or something like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's around this like bypassing of the things that are normally in the way, I think, and it's also possible to overcome fears like this with lucid dreaming, with
Mm.
like uh, and I got into this for a little bit, and I was reading some books on lucid dreaming, and a lot of people have overcome like fears of like spiders or dogs or something like this that originates from some sort of traumatic childhood experience. And uh, when this type of fear materializes in a dream, through the act of lucid dreaming, becoming aware of the dream and then being able to consciously make decisions in the dream, I was reading about a lot of people who have overcome fears in waking life through confronting that fear in a dream scenario. So say you're running away from a giant spider in your dream, and this is a recurring dream that you've had for fucking years, right? And like but suddenly you become aware of the dream through your practice of lucid dreaming, and you turn around and you confront the spider. And I was reading that like this is something that people have used repeatedly, is like the act of stopping, like no longer running, turning around, facing the thing that's chasing you, and then just asking it a simple question: what do you want? And it like over and over again, I was reading that in many cases, like the thing that was chasing the person would just stop and then turn into something like friendly, or like transform into another thing, and then just say something simple like, oh, I just want to be friends. And then after waking up from that dream, the people found that they were no longer afraid of this thing, because they had somehow like they had got to their like they had accessed something in their subconscious and changed the way that they perceive something at this
Mm-hmm.
base level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that like, is it like cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff like this, confronting the thing that you're the source of the trauma, or stuff like this, is a big part of it. So I guess it's like whether it's a dream or a drug state or something, but being able to safely get at that, which then
Mm-hmm.
makes you think it's like with virtual reality, you could like set
Yeah.
up these, environments where people could, if you had good enough virtual reality. But that's maybe maybe that's a topic for another day. But yeah, it's interesting to me. And I mean, but the thing with the drug, the dream thing, I'd never heard of that, but it makes a lot of sense to me. The thing with the psychedelic angle of it though too is that there is some change in brain chemistry. So maybe there's a change in brain chemistry going on in your dream state. I don't know.
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised. But you
Well,
get
it's
this.
like you're accessing DMT, right, in the dream state. Like DMT
Mm.
is flooding into your system.
Mm, mm,
That's a good point.
So it's like like in many ways very similar to the ayahuasca experience, or smoking DMT. Although I've never smoked DMT, but from what I've heard is that it's almost too intense to maybe it's very intense and quick, isn't it?
yeah,
When
that's
you
Yeah,
my
quick
understanding.
in human years.
quick in,
Yeah,
in human.
yeah, but when you're in the alternate dimension, then you've
Yeah,
actually existed for hundreds of years. Yeah, of
yeah,
course, right?
that's right.
Of course. Every good scientist knows that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting area, and I mean, it's one that like it's easy to discredit, like for people to be like, "That's just you bunch of hippies doing this stuff." But it's really cool that there is more and more research, actual like good research going into
Yeah,
it. There's still a lot of like I said, talking with the people at this conference and stuff, and doing some a little interviews here and there with some other people about it. I mean, there's a lot of people that are still really skeptical of it because for reasons like there's no good placebo to do a placebo controlled trial for a
yeah.
lot of psychedelic studies. So
Well,
when they're researching these things in depression patients and stuff like that in the lab, you can't really say um, you can't really use the placebo setup,
right.
because it's like people know it's pretty obvious when you're on
I
a psychedelic or not. I
Mm,
mean, and that's just sort of like a methodological thing about it. You can still look at there's other ways you can design an experiment where you have a depressed person and they self-report to you their symptoms, which is what any like these are standard psychological tests, questionnaires, things like that. You tell your symptoms and you get like sort of a rating of your depression. you go through a thing like this and then you report back and you look for improvement in the symptoms that the patients are
Mhm.
telling you. That's one way to do it. But I guess you never never really know what the mechanism is, right? Like, so we don't know what the people are getting better, but are they getting better because they think because it's placebo, or it's actually something in the
Right.
drug, something like that? I mean,
Well,
there's a
I
lot of
know.
things to know.
So you're talking just around like expectation setting, because people are coming
Yep.
into this with the expectation that they are going to be able to solve something. They
Right.
then, right. So you're
Look
unable
to solve
to
it, and then they solve.
yeah, you're unable to differentiate if, well, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. Is that
And setting, we know, plays such a huge role in the drug experience itself. It's like some researchers are even talking about psychedelics as almost like a super placebo, where it's like we don't know if it's chemically doing stuff to alleviate depression or something like that, but it might put you in such a receptive state that you're, healing yourself, which kind of goes to what we were talking about before, where it's like it puts you in this state where you can heal yourself, kind of thing. But these are just some of the questions that have come up in the scientific community as to like what is going on here, that are difficult to answer.
Hmm. Well, I think that is what's happening. You are in this situation healing yourself, in my opinion, anyway. But it's like in a way that wouldn't be possible without the help of the
Mm-hmm.
substance or medicine, whatever you're taking.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and you could talk about it like antidepressants in the same way, where it's like if the goal of antidepressants could be just to, I mean, like traditional antidepressants that you get prescribed over the counter kind of thing, where if the goal is just to stop the symptoms so that you can then, work on other things. Like, this is cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Like, it's all about
Mm.
changing your behaviors and the link to, well, cognition, to stop these sort of, how would you put it, negative pathways or connections or something like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
But this is this is my understanding of the psychedelic stuff as what it does.
Mm.
But Owen, maybe we could talk a little bit about your experiences, because like I teased at the top there, you went to Peru and part of a ayahuasca retreat, which is interesting. And it also, well, I mean, let me not put words in your mouth. Why don't you, let us know like exactly what the experience was, where you went, and like what was, well, first of all, what made you want to do it? Is it curiosity or?
Sure, yeah. So the place that I went is called the Temple of the Way of Light, and I found this place through, I was listening to a podcast, one of Tim Ferriss's podcasts, with a guest he had on, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's actually, I think he's lives and spends most of his time here in Vancouver working on the downtown east side with people who, a lot of people who have challenges with opiate addiction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he was discussing on this podcast with Tim Ferriss the benefits of ayahuasca experiences and his kind of foray into that area. And he talked about working with a place down in Peru. And then so I was Googling Dr. Gabor Mate ayahuasca, and then this place came up. And then I looked at the how much it costs, and I was like, okay, maybe maybe something like that I could do in the future. And I kind of just put it in the back of my mind. And then I just had some things come up in my personal life that really brought it back to the forefront for me. And then I like looked at my bank account and I was like, you know what, I have the money to do this. Like, fuck it, I'm just going to go do it, because I kind of felt like I had I'd reached this place where, I'd been doing a lot of self-work and self-reflection and personal healing for quite a while. A lot of it, I suppose, inspired by a relationship that I was in, and ways that I was trying to show up for my partner more in a way that she was expressing that she needed me to. And it kind of just, it got to a point where we were having challenges, and I was recognizing my own, like, some challenges in my own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
Around like depression was certainly something that I was struggling with. And I just thought, like, fuck it, I'm just going to go and do this, because
So it was I just wanted to like just set the context that it wasn't like you were just like, oh hey, I like doing drugs, I'm gonna go try this out. You had a purpose behind it. You had a reason for, wanting to try this.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think like there wasn't, I'm not sure if maybe some people think that it might be a fun experience, but that that it I don't know if maybe it is for some people. It certainly wasn't. I don't know if I would call it. I mean, it was like it's hard. It's hard to put words on it. It was certainly fun in that it was like a fucking adventure. Like it was exploration into myself in this very, very exciting way. But it was also fucking horrifying and challenging and fucking scary.
Yeah.
But there was, I think, like these were all the ideas I had around it before going there. Anyway, I knew that it was a very, very intense experience and nothing to be taken lightly. So
Yeah. So you had done some research. Like you said, you've been following this guy, this researcher who was working with opiate addiction and stuff in
yeah,
Vancouver. So you didn't go into it, yeah, like naively, we'll say.
yeah, yeah, definitely not. And I think like, yeah, I had an intention going in. It was very much for the reasons of personal growth and healing and overcoming some like past traumas and things that I felt were holding me back. You know, and I had I used to have problems with alcohol addiction, with like specifically I suppose binge drinking was my problem.
Yeah.
And that was something I quit drinking alcohol. It was maybe 4.5 years ago. And the decision to go was definitely linked to that, but it wasn't the driver for it. I felt that I had already like I didn't feel at the time like I was struggling with alcoholism and I needed to go to overcome this. Like I haven't been drinking now for 4.5 years or something, and I was just down in Peru in December. But it was certainly like an investigation into like, okay, where did this addiction with alcohol come from, right? Like what were the reasons for me getting so lost in this substance abuse for quite some time?
Yeah, like self-medicating or something.
Yeah.
So then I'm curious then, like, so you find this place that you got the idea, you want to try this, you want to do this, you have your reasons, you find this place that looks good, you go down there. What's it like when you get there? And I am curious too, is like what your feelings about the process were like, and the operation that they were running, really, because you hear good stories and you hear bad stories about people doing some of these retreats in different places. So you show up, what's the process? How do they bring you through it? And yeah, what did you get? What was your impression of it? Like, it was well run, you felt safe, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about the place that I went. I was very, very impressed with it. I kind of showed up in this place, Iquitos, and then met up with, there was a group of 23 of us that would all go through this together. We were all doing a 12-day retreat together, and a representative of the temple came and met us, and he took us on a bus and then a boat into the Amazon to the location where the temple is. And then we kind of met everybody there the first day, and they took us through like a bit of an orientation and everything. But the way that this organization is very, very respectful to the traditional uses of this medicine, this plant medicine. And they work with a group of Peruvian people, the Shipibo, and they work with healers, with maestros. They call themselves, from this group of people who were the ones guiding us through these ceremonies. And then there was also some Western facilitators there, people who can speak English and also have had like deep experiences with ayahuasca and are very well versed in the types of like, I get just well versed in the experience,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but coming at it from a point of view of being able to speak English, being able to understand maybe more the perspective that like people like me are coming to the temple. Um, and yeah, I felt safe. I felt well taken care of the whole time. I had complete trust in the facilitators and the maestros the whole time that I was there. And um, yeah, as far as like the legitimacy of the Temple of the Way of Light, like yeah, it's a fantastically run
Hmm.
um, organization. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's good to hear, right? Because I mean you're obviously putting your trust in someone else. I mean this happens any time you travel and do something like this. You're at the mercy, I guess, of the people doing it. But I mean you're in such a vulnerable state when you're in the drug state. So that's kind of my next question then is, so how many times did you do the ceremony? And I mean, you can go into as much detail of what that experience was like for you. But then I'm also curious as to like what was sort of the in between times, and was there a process after doing the ceremony of discussion, reflection? Was there people? Were you kind of just talking with the other people who had done it, or was there maybe some kind of guidance from the facilitators as to what did you experience? How did that make you feel? Kind of trying to interpret or integrate that experience into your well-being or whatever, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that was a part of this whole experience that was very, very valuable in itself. Like not just the, taking the ayahuasca, going through, spending time under the influence of the medicine and in ceremony, and kind of having everything come up there, but also the time spent outside of that. Like you said, we would have the days free to discuss with the other people. Like we'd eat meals together, and everybody, the next day after ceremony, people would be talking and sharing like the experiences that they had. You were also like very, very welcome to just have some alone time if you needed, and there was designated areas in the lunchroom, the area where we ate meals, where like a table where if you were sitting there, everyone knew like you didn't want to speak to anybody. You were still like
just staring off into the
Yeah.
rethinking your entire existence.
Yeah, and then there were also several sharing circles that we had where we all sat down together and basically went around, and you could speak how on whatever parts of your experience you wanted to share with the group. But there's also like really a lot of catharsis in that action of talking about what you went through the night before, or maybe 2 nights previous, and maybe like now that you've had some time to kind of let it sink in, process it a little bit, and maybe understand a bit more about what you were actually learning from that, or what parts of yourself you were accessing, and then translating that into something that you could explain to the rest of the group. That was a very powerful experience for me.
Mm-hmm. So
Also,
do you
just
think it would have been less useful if you didn't have that aspect of it?
definitely for me, yeah, because like the vulnerability of that action too is um, is huge. Is like sitting in a group of people, like 23 people who you've just met, and sharing very, very personal parts of yourself, is like that's fucking scary, like that's like for a lot of people, that, I mean, for me, that's scary, but it takes courage for me to do that, but it feels really good
Mm-hmm.
uh, to do something like that and have other people like see and hear and recognize like parts of me that I'm sharing with them.
Mm-hmm. Like camaraderie in that. But I'm
Mm.
curious then, like, because this is one of the things that came up when I was speaking with one of the heads of this Mind Foundation here in Europe. Like I was explaining before we started, it's like the MAPS equivalent, the in the U.S. Here in Europe, and the guy that one of the like the co-founder of it was I was having a conversation with him, and he was talking about one of the services that they offer is they call it like integration workshops, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you've had a psychedelic experience. Now, what does that mean? What does it, and how do you incorporate that into your life? Because
Mm-hmm.
his position is that in Western society, we don't have sort of a framework for these experiences, whereas in the traditional ayahuasca ceremonies and peyote or whatever, when you're talking with indigenous people or cultures that have been using these things for a long time, they have a framework, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you visit the shaman, and there's a purpose for this, and there's a ceremony and stuff behind that. Whereas like we don't have that in our society, and his point is that we shouldn't necessarily just take the shamanistic tradition and try and force fit that into our society, but rather we should try and find a way, like if we're going to open up and have psychedelics in Western society and stuff, we should find a way to integrate them. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious if when you were there, if you were brought into that like kind of shamanistic way, like was there a like what was the language or the guidance from the people that were like administering? Was there someone that you would call like a shaman or a facilitator or something like that? And what was it, kind of just like, hey, here's a safe place to take this? Or was there like an explanation of like, this is why you take it, this is just, am I making sense here? Or
Um, yeah, so I can speak a bit more around. Yeah, I can just speak a bit more around like what happened once I arrived there, right? And so, um, yeah, the people who were taking the place of like a shaman, and your use of that word would be like the Shipibo healers or the maestros
mm-hmm.
that we would call them there. Um, Maestro just means master,
Yeah.
and so these are people who have been working with plants for most of their life, and the training that they go through to bring about like their expertise in this area is something that I think is like very, very foreign to it was very foreign to me. I can speak for myself in that like I have trouble kind of picturing how they see the world, right? Because they've spent most of their life getting very, very acquainted with different plants that they work with, and like sort of the process of um, becoming a maestro in the Shipibo culture is, once you set down that path, you take several dietas, they call them. These are basically diets where you'll diet on one specific plant for quite some time. Sometimes it can be a couple months, sometimes 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And during this time, often they will spend most of that time in isolation. They'll go to somewhere in the jungle away from people, and they'll just spend their time dieting on whatever specific plant they want to become more acquainted with, while at the same time taking ayahuasca to, like, I suppose, open up themselves to the interaction with this other plant that they're taking.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, and like over the course of this time, they'll eat very little food, whatever food is just necessary to keep surviving, basically, until they've formed almost a symbiotic relationship with whatever plant they're dieting on. And through this um, methodology of experience, they understand the effects of whatever plant they want to become more acquainted with.
Yeah.
And in this way, they're becoming masters of this plant, because they're almost becoming the plant for a period of time. It's like almost the only thing that's moving through their system from day to day. And so, I think I used this analogy when I was talking to Jared about my experience, and that like I I was I was trying to think of how do they see the world? Like how do they understand the world? And I was like thinking of, if like when a neurosurgeon, a brain surgeon in front of a patient who has the top of their skull off, and they're looking down at the brain, and they know they need to fix something, and because of their multiple years of experience and training, they know which part of the brain needs to be manipulated here. If I was right now put in front of somebody with the top of their skull chopped off, looking at the top of at their exposed brain, and I was told I need to fix something, I would be like, what the, like, I have no idea what the fuck to do. I'm completely lost here. I don't know what I'm looking at, right? And I kind of see it as that same way, like that like a brain surgeon is an expert in this area and sees something completely differently than I would in that situation. These maestros, when they are like working with us in ceremony and so, like helping to like move us through a process of healing, they are seeing something that I can't really imagine what they're seeing. I don't.
You mean when they're seeing you go through the experience?
Yeah, because the way that it would work is they would gather us in this structure they called the maloka. It was a circular structure with a large pointed roof, all made out of wood. And we each had a place, and we would all sit around the outside of this circle. And then when the ceremony would start, the maestros would come in, and we would one by one go up and drink the ayahuasca, and then go back to our place. And as an individual, each of us would spend the entire ceremony, which we usually drank the ayahuasca around 8 p.m. and it usually lasted until around 1 in the morning. The effects would usually, for me, last much longer than that, but the ceremony would usually close around 1 a.m. And during that whole time, each of us is just spending that entire time just on our little bed on the ground, and we have a chair that we can like sit in, and that's it. It's like everything that's happening is happening inside. There's no interaction. It's like, and it's dark. It takes place at night. You're not speaking to anybody else. You're either spending your time with your eyes closed or open. Even if they're open, it's usually so dark that like what's happening for you is mostly internal anyway. And during this time, the Shipibo maestros are moving around the circle, and they sing to us. They sang to us what they call their Icaros.
Yeah, I've heard of these. They're like very specific chants or songs. Yeah,
exactly. And so the Icaros is something that the maestros, they develop during their time spent in the jungle doing these dietas with plants. And the Icaros is very much a translation of their experience with certain plants. And it is kind of their, it's a tool. It's a tool that they use to speak to the ayahuasca within you and to help bring about whatever healing change needs to happen for you specifically. And in that way, I suppose, like, so when I'm speaking of, like, when I was speaking of, I can't imagine what they see when they're looking at me, right? So in that situation, when it's dark and we're in the Maloka and one of the maestros comes and sits in front of me and starts singing their Icaros to me. And the maestros also take ayahuasca, same as us at the beginning of the ceremony. So they are also under the influence of the ayahuasca. And so when they are sitting across from me and singing their Icaros, you know, I imagine it in the same way that like that neurosurgeon is reaching down into someone's brain and maybe like, I mean, it's not the best example because I imagine, I don't know what a neurosurgeon is doing. Maybe they're like cutting pieces out, but maybe that is a good example. Is like you're cutting something out, whether it be a tumor or something like that.
Yeah.
That probably is a good analogy, right? Is like the maestro is looking at me and they're singing their Icaros, and their Icaros is probing through me and searching for the sickness or whatever it is that needs to be healed or removed or purged, and they're helping me to move that through myself, to rid myself of this and change. Yeah.
And this is like, I don't know, I'm kind of maybe being a bit reductionist or whatever here, and I mean, this is kind of my nature as someone that studies science and whatnot, but I can imagine that there's people listening and saying like, well, what is the, it's not mystical, right? Like there's chemical changes going on in the brain, and there's this interaction that you're describing between you and this person, the
Mhm.
maestro and you. Um, but my inclination is to be like, well, it's not like some telepathic thing that's going on. There's got to be some kind of, there's obviously something going on, but maybe it's the
Mhm.
rhythm of the song interacts with you. But also like what you said at the beginning, where it's like you're kind of self-healing, so you're finding something in this interaction that
Mhm.
is allowing you to, I don't know, access something or experience something. But then that's kind of my
Mhm.
question is, throughout this process, is it very much like, you're seeing something and being like coming to an awareness like, oh, this is what's been bothering me, I need to confront that, or I need to change that? Or is it kind of just this, I don't really know what's happening, but there's feelings, there's, maybe visions or something associated with it. And then, you're kind of like, well, I feel better, but I'm not really can I pinpoint exactly the moment where I had the breakthrough? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, to speak to that first point, is like what's happening here? How is something happening? Like, is this all in an internal level? Um, is the maestro actually like moving energy within me? Like, obviously. So like my I think I went down there not really knowing. I don't think you can really know
Hmm.
what you're going to experience, but I um, I had a much more spiritual experience than I was expecting,
Hmm.
and I think like I left Peru feeling like there were many parts of that experience for me that are really beyond my comprehension when it comes to traditional methods of kind of like you're saying, like analyzing something from a scientific point of view and trying to understand like, okay, what is happening here inside the brain, um, inside the body, that is facilitating this healing,
Hmm.
and how much of this interaction with the maestro is like their icaros is like helping your brain grab onto a pattern and then like move something through, or are they actually like manipulating um, energy within myself, like helping to heal something? Can they see what needs to be healed in some way that I don't understand, right? Like these are, and certainly I think they can,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like that's a difficult thing to take like at face value, but it's like I left that experience kind of feeling like, okay, like there's something going on here that's beyond my comprehension,
Yeah.
and in many ways is inexplainable, right? But at the same time, I'm not saying that it's like it's just fucking magic and that I just like went down and had like everything happen to me. Like this was very like I my I I very much felt that like, yes, this was giving me the opportunity to do some work within myself, and that um, you talked about like what is that process like, right? So I think for me a big part, and I think everybody seems to experience this differently, which is the interesting thing. Like, so some people have very very visual experiences, um, where they'll have these like fantastic visions, like pretty much these like waking dreams, right? For me that wasn't the case. I didn't really have these visions, but I had like visceral experiences. I felt things. I
Hmm.
very much felt things, and for me, the kind of process of healing that took place was, the way that I see it, is that I was able to access parts of myself that had been troubling me for very very long time, and to bring up feelings that I should have felt in those moments, but didn't let myself feel because it was too either maybe overwhelming or frightening, or just because of the fact that like growing up as a boy and as a young man, I was very like much closed off from my feelings and my emotions most of my life anyway.
Sure, yeah.
I think just because of the way that men tend to be socialized. So this process allowed me to access, I had a lot of memories come up. I had a lot of memories come up with the feelings and emotions attached to those memories that I never fully felt at the time when these experiences happened. And and so I would have like, the way that I see it is that one of the facilitators, he said this while I was down there, is that like we can't ever really like let something go until we've fully felt it.
Mm-hmm.
And like through that process of fully just feeling something and allowing ourselves to experience an emotion in its entirety, it can leave our body. Our body no longer has to like hold on to that. And so now that it's released in this awful fucking purge, like for the most part, right? Whether that like a lot of the time that's vomiting, right? There's a lot of fucking vomiting, and just like, for myself, that I spent a lot of time on my hands and knees just like retching into a fucking bucket and like crying and shivering and shaking.
Chill.
Yeah, it's like,
Dude,
as this like
so chill, such a chill retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, as this like awfulness kind of like moved through me. But then having done that, I feel like I felt like I felt like at the time, and I very much still feel this way, is that like now I no longer have to carry that in me somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, where it is just manifesting in this like maybe small amounts of stress every day, or anxiety, or depression, or disconnection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really long answer.
No. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's kind of what we were talking about, right? It's like you're able to, and I think this is what the folks I interviewed at the Mind Conference, again, it was like you have to be able to confront it in order to let it go. And so being in this emotional or, awareness space brought on by the medicine, it allows you to do that. Jared, you haven't said much for a while. What's your
No, I think a lot of that makes sense, right? The idea of having to feel something completely in order to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can only speak like if you're dealing with any sort of grief, right? Whether it's like loss of a loved one or anything, you really have to like feel that thing all the way through in order to let it go, or else you're going to hold on to resentment or not be able to actually let that issue go, right? So that I don't know, that makes really good sense to me. But also like what made me curious, like what was the, like you were talking about like the prep, like what were the few things you had to do, Owen, before you went down? Right, like you were meditation, and like I think like that's interesting, right? Is that they kind of want you to prep your body and your psyche before you go down for an overhaul.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that was a really important part of the whole process. It was, so they send out some recommendations and some like also some strict guidelines as far as ways to prepare. And there's some strict guidelines around like what sort of substances or types of food you're eating before you go down there. And they very much say like you can't be taking any sort of like drug or like mind altering substance. I think it was at least like, it might have been a month before or 2 weeks, but I forget now. But like that's very, very important.
So
And
that
then
would
as far
include like if you were previously taking antidepressants and stuff like that.
so with stuff like that, I'm not so familiar with the pharmaceuticals because,
Okay, yeah.
But I think like they were also available to like speak to you beforehand.
Okay,
to like,
yeah.
and I filled out like a form, like an application form, applying for this process beforehand, and where I talk about like my history, my kind of intention for going down there, any sort of drugs that I might be taking consistently or anything like that. But I think like I think probably for the most part, like most pharmaceuticals are contraindicated with ayahuasca, and like they recommend not taking them. Um, and then like the diet, there was dietary changes as far as like not eating like beef and pork, and limiting like oil and salt. And it was a very strict diet actually, like like 1 or 2 weeks before the arriving there, and then during the whole time that we were there. Yeah, you're eating pretty much just vegetables and like chicken or fish, and yeah, no salt or oils or any sort of spices or anything like that. And then as far as mental preparation, they recommend coming down there with an intention, with a, a very concrete intention around like why you're doing this. And one of the kind of exercises that was I thought kind of cool with that was they recommend making an intention object. And that's something like while you're in this practice of thinking about your intention and maybe meditating from day to day and trying to get closer to the source of like, okay, what's bringing me down here, what's calling me to go through this experience. When you find that intention, to then spend some time creating an object while you're thinking about that intention that you can then bring down with you, and sort of have this like physical representation of like, this is why I'm here. Which I thought was a really cool exercise. And so for me, I like spent some time. I went for a bike ride down to the beach. I found a piece of driftwood, and then I spent some time like just whittling that driftwood and carving it and then staining it into just this little object. And I think it's just like a handy exercise to, sometimes it's kind of nebulous to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to fucking meditate and think about my intention for like what I want to do here. Like when you actually have some sort of physical exercise to concentrate on, it can help your mind kind of move something into the right places more easily.
And I wonder how to, like, again, this is me going back to sort of maybe the reductionist thing of like how this actually works. But I could see how like processes like this would center your, like if it's, set and setting, right? Like if you're developing this ritual around like, I'm going to go do this thing with a specific goal or question or something in mind, then then that will be on your mind when you do the ceremony. And then therefore maybe you can, that's what helps bring it out. Like that all makes sense. When they said like intention, was it like I want to, feel better, or or was it like a question, like I'm curious about this or that? Like how did you form that? And if it's, you don't want to go into the detail, no worries, but I'm just curious as to like, like how specific or vague was that sort of intention when you
Yeah, so they leave it very open-ended in that regard. Is like, this is it's up to each individual to understand really why they're coming down there, right? And I think it can be specific, and it can be also more broad. And I think like for myself, there were certain specifics that it was linked to, and then from a more general sense, like my intention was very much going down there with like wanting to just finally accept myself for who I am and love myself, so that for me it was very much about like overcoming some things within myself, accepting myself, loving myself, so that I could in turn come back and love other people in my life with my whole heart, instead of from my own kind of perspective on challenges that I was having, instead of always kind of holding back because I was maybe afraid of being too vulnerable or afraid of getting hurt.
And then after going through an hour of retching on the floor in the dark in the jungle, that's about as vulnerable as you can get, so I imagine.
Yeah, well, there's so many facets of this process and experience that I think contribute to the feeling of like, I can speak for myself, for my own well-being, that I have felt since coming back from this, and that I think a lot of people share, is that like there's so many things at play. There's this purging of of shit that like you've just been holding on to that you don't want to be holding on to anymore. This allowing, this like release of that. There's also the courage that it takes to be doing this. Like I've never been tested in my life like I was tested down there. Like after the third ceremony was incredibly challenging and horrifying for me, and to then walk back into that maloka for the fourth ceremony with the intention of drinking ayahuasca again and fucking like handing my control of my body, my mind over to this substance, this medicine again, knowing that it might send me back to that same place of terror. Like doing that like took more courage than I've ever had to show, to display in my life. And knowing now, like after having gone through that I can do that, like that provides like a very strong feeling of self-worth. And I think that that's a part of it. A part of this whole thing too is like that a lot of people get out of it, and that I really got out of it, was like having the courage to go in there, to venture down into the darkness within myself and confront whatever is there, and to not turn away from that, to just fucking face that and do it several times. Like, we went through 7 separate ceremonies, which is like a fucking marathon. It's just like, it's a lot. It's fucking a lot. And it's like going through that, like being able to do that has, I kind of feel like now, like I don't think that I could ever confront anything that would be more difficult than that was.
So, I mean, it's definitely, since you've done it, you said it was in December, so it's been, 6 months or so. So you've definitely noticed improvement in your life since then. Like, it's not like it's, you feel the effect and then it starts to maybe wane over time. Like, do you feel like there was like a change, or you got some benefit from it that you'll carry with you moving forward?
Definitely. Like, this was very much a life-changing experience for me, and it was dramatic, and I think, I was saying this to Jared the other day, like I didn't really understand what having a life-changing experience meant before going down there, and then like I think it was like while I was maybe midway through that experience, I suddenly realized, like, oh, okay, like I'm not gonna be the same again after this. Like, this is a life-changing experience, and I've and a big thing for me that I got from this was connection to myself, and also feeling more able to connect with others, and also just like the earth, and like my place here, connect with my own life too, like instead of feeling actually some ownership, some responsibility over myself and my own life, instead of maybe feeling like a unwilling passenger. At some points.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I like this, you're talking about like the difficulty, the journey of it, because I mean, another way that this is done in some cultures is the spirit, the vision quest or whatever, in some Native American cultures, where it's like more or less the hardship of it, like being out in the woods in the elements with very little food and water. I mean, that puts your brain in this similar kind of state, this similar sort of hallucinogenic, whatever state, but it's also that hardship, right? Like, it's going through that thing. So that's fascinating. And I mean, I've always, I've been curious with these kind of things, but I never felt, like my interest in it, obviously it's fascinating from a scientific point of view. I think from a kind of, I'm not a religious person in any way. I like to think that I'm kind of spiritual, I guess. There's
Mm,
mysteries of the universe that I like contemplating and I think are interesting, and things like this. But
mhm,
for me, it's always kind of, and this is, I think, the wrong way to go about it. It's like the curiosity. I'm just curious. I don't
mm,
feel like I think I'm blessed in the fact that I don't feel like I need it. Like I would struggle, I think, with the intention part of it. My
mm,
my intention would just be like, let's see what
mm,
happens. Like I'm curious to know myself. I mean, I am curious to know myself. I'm all these different things. So you mentioned lucid dreaming. I've toyed around with that, meditation and things like that. But
mhm,
so I think that's like one of the reasons that I wouldn't do it, because I don't want to be frivolous with it. And what you're
mm.
describing is not, that doesn't sound like a fun, like
Yeah.
smoke a joint with your buds and, listen to Pink Floyd or some shit. Jared,
Yeah.
what's your take on the whole
Yeah,
thing?
no, it sounds terrifying. Um, I think like yeah, more like I would be interested in doing it, but I don't think I've like more so. I think there's a lot of work you have to do before you go get yourself into something that's that's serious. Like you don't go run like an ultra marathon, without training for a regular marathon. And I'm not even I'm
You got to get up
running
off the
five
couch.
minutes. Yeah, I gotta get up. Yeah, yeah. I haven't got up off the mental couch, as it were. You know, like before this, like Owen had went and did a silent meditation retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
For how long is it?
Yeah, I did a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat in Thailand. And so,
Jesus.
yeah, previous to
Yeah,
going down to Peru and doing ayahuasca, that was the most challenging thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
um,
that was your marathon
yeah, like that
before you
was,
did an ultra marathon.
yeah, and like having that experience, that like spending 10 days in silence with myself, um, that gave me some confidence going down into Peru, because I felt like I had already kind of overturned some stones
Mm-hmm.
and looked at some things, and begun to maybe understand some parts of myself, and pinpoint some parts of myself that I wanted to change, right? But I also recognize that like not everybody has, um, like I'm sure there's lots of people out there who feel fucking good, and like do feel connected with themselves, and like they have appreciation for themselves and love themselves, um, and maybe don't feel like the need to like go do something like this to heal something, um, and that's okay. I think like I wouldn't say that there's still no benefit to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think like approaching it with a healthy amount of respect is a good way to go about it, because it's like, you are like, as soon as you drink the ayahuasca, that's it. You're fucking you better strap in, because
Yeah.
like
There's no
Can't
turning
take
back.
salt out of that soup.
you're handing over control to something else, and um, so you need to be prepared for wherever that might take you, and the unexpected places that might take you, but I think like going in with an intention of just like curiosity around yourself, I think that's still like a a good way to go into it, right? Because like, um, I think the only bad way to go, or like irresponsible way to go into it, would be to like thinking that you're gonna like do it at a house party, or something
Yeah.
like this, like,
Just to get
um,
fucked up kind of thing.
yeah, just to get fucked up. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like,
I would think also,
Well, you will get fucked up.
yeah, well, of course.
No two ways about that. It might just be a different type of fucked up
Yeah.
but
you
but
don't
it could.
want.
But I think it's just that like this is like getting fucked up in a way that like could have lasting consequences
Yeah, yeah, it
if
could.
you
Yeah,
Yeah.
weren't prepared for what it might like show you, or something
I
like
think
this.
yeah.
But
I think the other thing too is that if people think like that this is going to be a quick fix, I think that's another thing that you see a lot in sort of the the community. There's the scientific community, and then there's the traditional community that deals with this stuff. But then you get a lot of the, sort of whatever new agey kind of stuff that gets a little, I don't know. I'm a less of a fan of this kind of view on these things, where they're like, you know what, pharmaceuticals are just there to, keep you sick. They want to just keep you, but if you just do ayahuasca or ibogaine or whatever it is, then you're cured. And you don't, but it's like, I think that's a bad way to go about it too. And it sounds like this place asked something of you, and didn't sort of guarantee that this was just going to fix all your problems. Like, they asked like that you work on this before you go down, because it's not a quick fix. It's not a matter of just sip this thing and you're cured.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they also focus very much on integration at in the last well, throughout the whole experience, but then especially in like the last few days before everyone leaves, is like, okay, now what happens? Because now you're going to leave this little bubble, this little like almost like very like while I was there, it very much felt just completely separated from everything else, from all other aspects of my life, and I was able to just fully sink into kind of what was happening in this little like kind of protected little bubble. But
like physically you are, and then mentally as well, right? Like you're literally like you took a boat into the middle of the jungle.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Like, yeah, so yeah, geographically separated, mentally separated from everything. Like, and they take your foot, like, well, they don't take your phone, but they say like, if you want, you can put your phone in the safe so you're not tempted to use it, or if you know you're going to be able to resist any sort of temptation, just turn it off, keep it in your room. But I didn't look at my phone the whole time I was there. It's like very, very disconnected, like, and that's a very important, is like to be disconnected from the outside world, from your life outside of this, and to like focus on the internal while you're here. But they do bring that up, as they say like, okay, now what happens? Because you're going to leave here, you're going to go back to your life, and suddenly like you're going to be back in the place where you're going about your day, and you sink back into your routines, and your brain is going to want to just jump back into those old patterns that like have been worn down through like the months or years or whatever it may be. And like that's not just in your day-to-day actions in life, but also your relationships with people. And I think that is one of the probably the most difficult parts of trying to enact personal change and execute on personal growth, is the relationships, human relationships, because other people have an idea of who you are, right? And so it's like me coming back from Peru now, and I come and I meet up with Jared. Jared has an idea of who I am through our interactions, our experiences, our friendship together, right? But now, after having this experience, I feel very much different and changed, but Jared doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Jared didn't have that experience. And so like Jared still is going to want to like interact with me the same way that we've always interacted. And if I want to like be different, it's going to take like very conscious action to like change the way that I interact with Jared and with my other friends, right? And so they talk about this, and they talk about like integrity as being like true to your word, and understanding like what your values are. And like that was also like a big focus they put on this experience, is getting in touch with like what is your what are your core values, what like I forget the wording has like escaped me at the moment, but it was like getting in touch with like basically like your purpose almost, and having come to an understanding maybe of like what that is through this experience. Okay, like now how do you live your life true to that? And how do you stay in alignment with yourself once you leave here? And and they said, because like actions are now the important part, is like you've spent a lot of time in this internal space within yourself while you've been here, and now you're going to go back out into the world, and the way that you act, your actions are going to like that is what determines like your impact. It doesn't, like what we think about things that's important, but our actions determine the impact that we have on,
Yeah.
on other people and on.
You need
on,
both. You can't just have one or the other. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they say, like, if you leave here and you just have, and like you don't actually execute on this and like change the way that you act, that then this is just an experience. This just becomes a memory, a nice memory, or an interesting experience. But if that's all that it becomes, then what was the value?
Yeah, there's no consequences for the rest of your life or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got like, we could start wrapping it up or whatever here. So unless you got something, Jared, my question is, was there anyone in your group or that you saw that did not handle it well, or, that maybe left kind of being like, I shouldn't have done that, or, did you see that, or did the people you were with kind of all walk away universally being like that was a useful experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like that, on like what day you ask someone that question
Could change.
is important. It's very important, because this is a 12-day. We spent 12 days there, and we drank ayahuasca in 7 separate ceremonies over that time. And throughout that time, like, and so something they told us all at the beginning, which was very important, is that like it's important for you. What they said to us is, it's important for you to trust that this is a process, and to see it through to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a process, and then it's going to take you somewhere, to some sort of conclusion. And if you leave halfway through, when you're down in the fucking darkness, and everything is horrible, you're missing out on like the important part of like coming back up into the
Right.
light.
Yeah.
Gaining some sort of understanding of something. So like certainly like maybe it was day 5, or I think it was after the 4th ceremony for me, when I was in a mental space of feeling very convinced that like this was a fucking mistake. And that like I was, and that like
laying
like,
in the
You
jungle.
stewed your prune, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I had lost confidence completely in that process that they said to trust in. I was like in this place of despair and kind of hopelessness, and it took some very like wise words from one of the facilitators to kind of like bring me back into confidence with the process and with myself. And then at the end, it was like a very different feeling. It was like, okay, like that was worth it for me. And I think, I can't speak for everyone, but from what I could tell, I believe that everyone else felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I certainly saw people go through struggles and be stuck in this like in a somewhere that wasn't like a very and sometimes like a hopeless and dark place. But it seemed to me that at the end of it, after that 7th ceremony, everyone had kind of come out into this state of like learning and liberation, and understanding the value of the experience. Yeah.
Man, it sounds like a hell of a journey. But
yeah, it was.
Yeah, like I said, Jared, do you have anything you want to tack on or add? Yeah.
No.
You're just looking stunned over there.
Like I said, yeah, it was tough to interact with Owen when he came back. I tried to get him to drink again, but I thought the journey was going to fix him.
Yeah.
And he was gonna be able to drink again. Like, it was very fun when he drank. But yeah, no, he wouldn't. I don't know. He wouldn't drink, so I don't know, man. I don't think it did jack shit.
Yeah.
It it's a dumb plant, I guess. I don't know, dude. Whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, he seems happier, I guess, and he's like dropping
Yeah, I
all this
guess, but
knowledge
he's
and
not drinking,
wisdom.
so how could he be happy?
Yeah.
I don't. I don't need to go down there and do that. Like I'm fine.
Yeah. I'll stick.
I'm like perfect Brad over here.
Yeah, sure. I'll just stick to 8 beers a day and, be fine. But hey, I live in Germany. That's just the norm here. That's what everybody's
That's the
doing.
culture.
No, that was sweet. Hey, man, Owen, thanks for coming on here and sharing that. That's really cool. And like I said, it's something I'm really fascinated in and probably going to cover a bunch more times on this podcast. So it was great meeting you. It was great talking to you about that. I'm sure.
Yeah, you too, Brad. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, we can.
Yeah, thanks, Brady.
You're welcome to come back at any time to talk more about it or anything. If you've listened to any of the episodes Jared and I have done, you know that we just like to talk shit. So
yeah, cool. Yeah, I'd love to, man. That'd be great.
Awesome. Jared, always good to see you. I know you got a unicycle wheel you got to fix.
Yeah,
you got to get to your
on that unicycle.
You got to get to your juggling retreat. So we'll let you go.
Thanks, man.
All right, well, there you have it. My many thanks to Owen and to Jared for coming on for this episode. As always, thank you to the Freak Motif for the music, Sebastian Aboud for the logo. Follow us at 2BradForYou, Instagram, Twitter. You can hit me up at bvampired on Instagram, Twitter. And rate, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, wherever you're getting your podcasts. We greatly appreciate it. And stay safe out there, folks. If you're going to experiment with any of this stuff, do so very carefully. And I would recommend talking to many people before you even think about doing this. That's just the disclaimer. So thank you again for listening. Love you all. Take care. Till next time. Bye now.